Hey everyone, welcome to my Wenatchee Clovis Tools and Technology series. I have a lot to say. I've always had a lot on my mind about Clovis. For some reason I'm very interested in the culture, but it's so broad, even though it's such a short time frame. I really just want to focus on Wenatchee Clovis specifically. So, let's see. The Wenatchee site, the Wenatchee Clovis site in Washington was discovered in 1987. It's on a gravel bar called Pangborn Bar, created by recurring superfloods that started like 2,000 years prior and lasted over 1,000 years, and it happened all up and down the ice-free Wenatchee Valley. The Wenatchee site was actually never covered by the ice sheet. The ice sheet stopped. It dammed up the Columbia River a little ways north of the Wenatchee site. I don't know, 100 miles? I can't remember. And the Wenatchee site was never covered by the ice sheet. But because the Columbia River was dammed, and the ice sheet was receding, there was a lot of melting, so a lot of superfloods occurred. So Pangborn Bar, I'm going to talk more about all this stuff later. I'm just mentioning a highlight right now. The Wenatchee Clovis cache was deposited on Pangborn Bar about 13.4 thousand years ago. And it's a unique site because it was sealed by Glacier Peak volcanic ash dated 2,000 years prior. Contains a bunch of stone tools, some rods made out of mammoth bone, and 14 fluted points. I'm going to talk about all of it. The Wenatchee Clovis site is unique in a lot of ways, but one is because it was the most completely intact and professionally excavated Clovis cache. There's also, in this video, there's going to be a Sheridan Cave Manis site collection. Or connection, not collection. And they're going to pertain to this a lot. So, let's see. I'm going to talk about 10 subjects. There's 10 different piles here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 subjects. Doesn't mean 10 videos. I don't know how many videos there will be, but there will be several. The first subject is titled Not Points But Cores, Debunking the Projectile Myth. Wenatchee Clovises were not projectile points. They were cores they took bifacial flakes from. And I'm going to show that. I'm going to explain all of it. So, what did they do with the bifacial flakes? Were they waste or what? We're going to talk about that too. What other cores did they use? So if this is a bifacial core, what other cores did they use and where are they? Why don't we find them? We're going to discover what types of cores they use based off the tools required to the stone tools required to work ivory and bone. We're going to talk about the sources for flint, the sources for sandstone hammerstones, basalt hammerstones. They would have had to have choppers and axes of some kind. We'll talk about that. Some would have been ground, I believe, and some would have been chipped, and I'll talk about why. I'm going to talk about preservation bias a lot. Well, an introduction to that would be we believe today that Clovis points were projectile points because we find stone projectile points in the archaeological record and they basically last forever. But bone projectile points don't last forever. They deteriorate sometimes very quickly depending on the environment, and that's called preservation bias. We're going to talk about that a little bit, and that's one of the reasons why I think that they use or call Clovis points projectile points. This is a replica of a beaver tail. I think it's called a beaver tail that I made out of some Missouri rock. This is the second subject, titled Engineering Killer Tip. LOL at killer, right? So we're going to talk about qualities of a good projectile point. And this point is a projectile point and it has excellent qualities, and we're going to talk about it. Also the part that is attached to the projectile point. We're going to use this point to help explain why Wenatchee's Clovises won't work as projectile points. The next subject is going to be scarcity, superfloods, and the paleo environment. This is a Dalton ads that I made in one of my Dalton videos. I'm using here as an example because the Dalton people they had a lot of woodworking tools. Clovis people did not have a lot of woodworking tools. Wood was very scarce, so no tools like this would be made, mostly anyway. The ice was dammed up the Columbia. There were a lot of superfloods and mega floods that were happening on a regular basis that lasted over 1,000 years, and they scoured the entire landscape. It was they removed all trees. There was, I think I have to go look back again, and I'll talk about it later in detail, but I believe near the Wenatchee site, the water level was 500 meters higher than it is today. When you look at an aerial view of like the the Wenatchee site. You can't even tell it's on a mega flood river gravel bar. But if you look at profile, you can see the basalt on one side of the river and the other, and there's sandstone landslides from there, and there's a lot of erratics, huge mega floods that caused big gravel bars, but the water just didn't flow there. There would have been wood in some places, but it would have been very, very scarce. One thing that was available was bone and ivory, and there were lots of bone and ivory available. So we're going to talk about the kind of tools that they would have used to work on bone and ivory. We're going to create tools that are going to work on bone and ivory, and we are going to work on bone and ivory with those tools. We're going to perfect those tools until we get tools that are doing the kind of job we want them to do. Let's see. Before I go on, I guess, let's see. Because of the mega floods, there were some agates available near Wenatchee and the river, near Wenatchee, the Columbia River Basin. But the material at the site, at the Clovis site, that material came from about 250 miles away, if I remember right. But we're going to talk about that. The next subject I want to talk about is bone and ivory, the paleo composite arsenal. This is just a couple pieces of ivory that I have that I've used for experimental flint knapping. I may or may not work on these pieces, but anyway, ivory and bone were very, very abundant during the Pleistocene era. Okay, we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about why they used ivory and bone as projectile points instead of stone. They did use stone as projectile points, but it would have been for smaller game, and ivory would have been for larger game. We're going to explain all of it. I'm going to go through all of it. Let's see. A bone projectile point requires 2 times the energy to penetrate as compared to a sharp stone projectile point. So that seems contradictory to what we're talking about here, right? So then why did they use ivory instead of stone? I'm going to go through all of it. I love it. It's part of my favorite part. And to make these tools, I'm going to use this right here is my toolkit. The title of this subject is the Paleo Toolbox, Makers of Makers. So I'm going to use these tools to create other tools that I can work bone and ivory with. To rephrase, I'm going to use these tools to create other tools that can work bone and ivory. The primary need. What I mean by the primary need is they needed tools to work bone and ivory, not wood. So I'm going to make primarily tools that work bone and ivory. I'm going to use these tools to create sophisticated tools and weapons systems. These people were Homo sapiens. They are the same people as you and us today, except they are much smarter and I could talk about that too. They were very intelligent and engineers of sophisticated systems that we do not give them credit for. I'm going to talk in detail about it. Next subject, flake science, utility in a single strike. We're not just taking flakes here. We're taking very, very predictable flakes. I took some flakes, those flakes, a real wide one, to create a platform here on this side that I could take flakes from. And there's a crested flake, and there's one right after the crested flake. I left the cortex on this. This was just experimental. I wouldn't do that normally, but the point here is this face that you see is narrower than the face underneath, and that makes this a very unique and special blade that is very utilitarian. I'm going to talk about it. Same with this, but this can be made into different tools. I'm going to talk about what these kinds of flakes can be used for. The ridges on the white Burlington flakes, those are taken from a Dalton series videos, and but they have very unique characteristic about them that you can use as a draw knife in a way that I'm gonna bet you're not aware of, at least most of you. It's not what you think. I'm not going to be using the edges, but I'll show you. I think you might be surprised. I'm going to talk about core and platform preparation, how you prepare cores. This, despite, I believe, popular belief, unconscious popular belief even, is that making these tools requires very skillful napping. If you're a very skillful napper, you can apply those skills to this as well. What I'm getting at, I think what I mean by it is, I think people just kind of blow off tools, stone tools, as I don't know, ugly, not pretty, not impressive. I'm not finding the right words for it, I'm sure, but to make those tools, it required some very skillful napping, and I'm going to show that. Potential transitional technology as megafauna die off as well. That's what, I show the Knife River piece. So as the ice, there was Glacier Peak that erupted, right? And so that many believe that killed off a lot of the megafauna. The ice sheet started receding, the atmosphere was getting warmer, and there was a new kind of game in play. New kind of meat on the table. New kind of lithic resources are starting to show up as well, as they make migration routes out of Wenatchee. So carrying over your Wenatchee Clovis technology into Knife River country at an early onset wouldn't be unruly, wouldn't be out of the question. It would be possible. We're going to talk about the importance of flake scar ridges. Something that has even blown me away, and I'm going to talk about it. I think it's going to blow you away as well. We're gonna make burins. We're gonna make all kinds of tools. we're gonna use these tools to work on ivory and bone. We're gonna move on to the next subject. The next subject is beyond points. The hidden diversity of Wenatchee toolkits. So it's more hinting around to what I've been talking about. They have more tools and projectile points. They had a lot of tools that they needed to work bone and ivory. There's a lot of bone and ivory around. I'm going to explain why they didn't have very many stone scrapers. I'm going to take the piece of antler that I cut off from one of my videos and try to put one of those tools in it and use it. The gouge, I'm going to put that drill in a stick and I'm going to use them. Bone sockets, it seems like that's prevalent in the archaeological record. However, I'm not sure it's prevalent in the Clovis archaeological record. But I could imagine that they would. So there again, just because I can imagine it or because you can do it doesn't mean that's what happened. But they used a lot of bone. They had a lot of bone from the animals they killed, the megafauna they killed, for a lot of their tools, and a lot of that stuff has just deteriorated and rotted away. We're gonna make these bone sockets so you can hold them and hit them. I want to be able to hit it with a heavy mallet. I want it to do the work indirectly, so I have control. And notice that these are flaked tools and not ground. That means I want precision. So I'm going to talk about all of that. To make these tools, some of the flakes are very small, controlled flakes to produce precision tool instruments. The Clovis people were very resourceful, master craftsmen, and they could use an entire piece of flint without letting a piece of it go to waste. Now I'm going to go through it and explain and show you. I'm going to talk about and explain why the percentage of stone projectile points versus stone tools is very, very low and almost non-existent, because they needed way, way, way more stone tools than they did stone projectile points, even projectile points of any kind. We're going to talk about it. These are a couple of cores that came from my Dalton series videos. I kept them here. They're just props for this video for now. But this subject, it's about a subject titled Core Logic and Cache Behavior, Wenatchee versus Dalton. Did Wenatchee people use something like this? Where are they if they did? And what's the difference between Dalton technology and Wenatchee Clovis technology? I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to explain it. What types of cores did the Clovis people have? How many different types did they have? I'm going to talk about Clovis caches in general a little bit. Professionally excavated versus other. Moving on to the next subject. The name of this subject is reverse engineering the cache. So these are rocks that I plan to work. I have plans for all of them. They're high quality. This one is variated a lot. High quality. That's a local rock. This is Burlington. I've already worked these a little bit to try to remove cracks and stuff. This one, I kind of wish I would have filmed it, but you can refit every one of those blades back together, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to refit it back together and show you what I took apart. I'm going to show you why I took it apart there, because of a bad spot, right? So I created a platform to remove the crappy crap. And the pile of flakes is the crappy crap. And there's a couple of blemishes in the core still, but we'll work on them and clean them up or remove them, whatever it'll be, we'll take care of them. Also want to note that these flakes aren't going to be wasted, right? The Clovis people, maybe you can't use one of those whole flakes as something you're swinging at real hard, because the integrity isn't there and it might break, but you can rip that thing apart into a lot smaller pieces and make smaller tools that you need for other things. So I'm gonna make all the tools that we need, that I think we need to make some Clovis things. We're gonna make from these rocks, and one of them will for sure be a biface, Wenatchee style biface at the end, as I need to make sure also that I collect bifacial core flakes. We're gonna try to develop, I think, what is probably 3 different types of cores that I believe the Wenatchee people used. And I don't know anything. I just think a lot and I speculate, and I just try to put it together in ways that make sense. Doesn't mean it's right. I'll probably flute it. These will all, I'm going to not make any tools for wood and bone, or for wood. I don't think I am. Probably just gonna, I need tools to work ivory and bone. I actually, not only do I need that, but I need tools that provide meat. So that also they needed tools for living. What else did they need? What did they need that we haven't found? Right? We're going to try to figure all that out, or not all of it. We're going to try to figure out some of that. And then the next subject I'm going to talk about is titled Simple Machines, Big Game, and the End of Ivory Tips. Like I said before, we're going to work on ivory and bone from tools I made. These bifacial potato chip blades, flakes, are crucial to the survival of many people around the world, including the Wenatchee people. And I'm going to explain how in the next surprise video series. But also in this subject, I'm going to explain and demonstrate how the Wenatchee people utilize the 5 simple machines: the lever, the wheel and axle, the pulley. Yes, the pulley. It's not what you think. You're probably going to be surprised. A wedge and a screw. Yep, even a screw. Also, you're probably going to be surprised, but I'm going to give examples and explain how the Clovis people, Wenatchee Clovis people, used the 5 simple machines. I'm going to talk about potential migration route out of Wenatchee. And then I'm going to talk about why did we stop using ivory and bone as projectile points predominantly. After the Clovis culture transitioned into other cultures, we almost completely stopped using bone and ivory as projectile points. I'm going to talk about why. It's not just because they disappeared. It's not just because megafauna disappeared. The ivory disappeared. That's a no-brainer. So, to wrap up, we're talking about the ingenious minds on Pangborn Bar. The Wenatchee people, the Wenatchee Clovis people, were very intelligent and sophisticated engineers that created elaborate composite systems, blending stone, bone, ivory, sinew, and pitch for their everyday life needs. They were master craftsmen who minimized waste and maximized functionality by leveraging every scrap of precious flint, even utilizing the entire core. They then used this flint to create tools that predominantly worked bone and ivory. The projectile points were made out of ivory, not stone. Bifacial core technology and its use will be further explained in the next Secret Surprise video series. But in the next video, I'm going to start with subject 1 and then work through those. So please stay tuned. It's my favorite subject to talk about, and if you're interested, there'll be some things that is going to interest you as well and question you as well too, and that's fine. Just put it in the comments. It's okay. We're experimenting here, and it's not many nappers, I don't think, doing this. So thanks for watching.